President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa took the young men and boys in Indaba to Soweto today. It's aimed at the prevention and combating of gender-based violence and femicide. Our reporter Pule Letshwiti-Jones was there as well in Soweto. He's back now here in studio joining us just to tell us what was the message, Pule, that the president gave to the young men and young boys of Soweto.
Okay, Pradan, we all know South Africa really carries a bad reputation in terms of being unsafe for women and children. You look at the quarter stats for SAPS as well. From the first 3 months, about 969 women being murdered, 15,000 complaints of assault as well. All of this, the president saying in link to gender-based violence, and he had a dialogue today, an Indaba, in which he's reaching out to young men and boys as well, in terms of having a dialogue about how they can develop their masculinities to value respect, accountability, and also ensure that they protect women in their communities. But he's also denounced the fact that we still live in some communities which advance patriarchal ideas as well. And he says this is some of the bad chains that really need to be broken down in the societies. But of course, gender-based violence is declared a pandemic. It's a scourge that he says needs to be combated. And the only way by preventing it from escalating is to ensure that you educate these young men and boys from a very primary level.
We need to talk about things like patriarchal attitudes, attitudes that are inculcated in men from a social point of view, from a family point of view, and from the societal point of view and the environment that we live in. That we men are more important than women. And therefore women have to answer to us, have to do our bidding, they have to listen to us.
Pule, you were on the ground there. I'm sure you got an opportunity to speak to some of the young men and boys who attended the president's Indaba.
I mean, definitely they had an opportunity to have a dialogue with the president as well, just so how they can go back into their communities and educate other young men and boys as well regarding what was spoken today. You know, South Africa really is facing a problem with gender-based violence.
It's a pandemic, as you said.
It's a pandemic. It's an issue that really needs to be taken head on. And the president saying that's one of the reasons why they mobilize resources working with private stakeholders to try and ensure that they have more of these outreaches, not only in the township or in the urban areas, but also in the villages where you cannot reach some of those young
traditional leaders.
Well.
If you speak patriarchy there, we have this deep-seated even cultural and practices that we've gotten used to, and we think it's normal.
I mean, definitely, this is where some of these cultural and religious practices are still being, prevalent in these communities, in the villages as well. And it's very important that this message really gets out there to these young men and boys. But of course, what I was impressed about is that we saw some of the private players who were saying they will be now going into schools, mentoring, educating, and equipping these boys with skills as well, because we were told about how, the drug addiction also plays a role, alcohol addiction plays a role. You find that a young man who's seeing he has a girlfriend, who has a wife, after drinking, after taking drugs, going back home and practicing, bashing their women and eventually killing them as well. You see with the cases that emerge.
The level of femicide is unbelievable.
The level of femicide is really out of hand, but hopefully we may be seeing a step in the right direction in terms of government intervention in fighting femicide and gender-based violence. But let's just take a listen to what some of the young men and boys had to say earlier on when I spoke to them regarding what they've learned from this dialogue today.
So in regards to today's program, I'm actually quite satisfied in the fact that we had more engagement with the president, because usually when we have forums like this, it just pertains to just having speeches, etc. But then what I was satisfied about was that we had engagement from the youth, we had questions, and he gave us answers to what we thought needed to be done.
Usually I don't see a point in coming to things like this, because it's focused majority around giving speeches to young boys, mainly lecturing young boys, but not finding out the purpose of why they do certain things, why they taught these things. So I feel like it was a productive program, and I see more of these in the future.
Well, I mean, like we heard the president say, it's going to take a while, but making sure that awareness is raised properly and that everyone has their correct concepts of masculinity and femininity and all of that under control is a good step in the right direction.
The some of the young people there, the young men and boys who were with the president in Soweto as part of his Indaba around GBV and femicide.